Welcome back. You're watching Invest Africa. Still with me, my guest, Doug De Villiers, Group CEO for Interbrand Sampson, Marc Spries, the Business Unit Director at Ogilvy Africa, and then Graham Cruikshanks, Director of Africa Operations at TBWA Lascaris. Marc, talk to us about the various channels to market: print, TV, radio, above the line, below the line. What's the most effective in Africa right now, and how's that evolving?
Well, if you took a snapshot of any country you flew into, instantly you'd say that outdoor has to be the biggest medium. But that's not true. I think it's been a very unregulated market, so hence there's been an absolute proliferation of outdoor. Television is still a big medium, always will be, and I think that just given the nature of the medium, it's also an educational medium, so people are learning a lot from the medium. It's going through a metamorphosis, and a very quick one, because not only are we going through the digital migration, so you're finding that a lot of stations are having to change from analog to digital. That's creating a little bit of chaos. We've just experienced that in Tanzania. And then of course there are a number of terrestrial stations which have various footprints. So you need to understand all of these channels. We often, and we see the numbers, that there's a huge growth in digital, but it's also in pockets. So mobile generally tends to be a hell of a lot bigger than the internet is, but in certain parts of Africa you'll find that Facebook, for argument's sake, is much bigger than anywhere else, or internet usage is much bigger. So East Africa, it's quite sophisticated, whereas in other parts not. Yeah. So you'd need to choose.
You agree with kind of this in terms of, it really just depends on the country you're dealing with right now, and also I suppose the digital migration and online advertising is really starting to become the next thrust that is shaping the whole advertising industry.
Absolutely. I think, look, traditional media, and by that I mean outdoor television, radio, is still very, very prevalent, and continues to dominate in terms of the brands' choices to communicate in a mass way. But digital, and specifically mobile, is changing the face of that. There's still issues with connectivity and smartphone availability, so I suppose many countries in Africa are lagging the rest of the world with regards to penetration of those types of technologies, but I certainly see that space playing a massive role in the way communication develops and changes over the next number of years.
Is television still relevant?
Absolutely, yes. But I think what television also does is deliver a message, if you like, in one-way communication, as does outdoor and as does a lot of the traditional newspaper advertising. The whole move to mobile and the ability of mobile to both send advertising or brand data out to clients in various markets is both also a curse and obviously a huge opportunity. Because at the same time, if something is advertised and the promise is not delivered, it then becomes a way of communicating around the negativities of brands. Yeah. And that's certainly going to probably be the next biggest challenge. We'll, I guess, find that the mix will change in various markets as the markets become more sophisticated. It's no longer the case that you go into the airport and because the CEO flies regularly, you have a poster on the wall. We're moving past that level of unsophistication into quite good and open sophistication in many of the markets, driven by action, but also with good informal communication amongst consumers in the markets. Yeah,
I think one of the things that is from our experience very prevalent, and perhaps a little bit more so than other parts of the world, is sort of experiential events, on the ground activity, because they do two things. One is that it gives people a tangible feel for products and experiences and brands, and it also permeates that sort of storytelling, word of mouth that exists across the continent.
Does that work particularly better in Africa than anywhere else in the world? I mean, what type of ROI do you see coming back from that type of investment or advertising spend?
I certainly do think it works exceptionally well in that part of the world. In terms of better or worse than more developed countries, I think perhaps in more developed countries consumers are a little bit more skeptical about brand engagement, so they tend to take a slightly standoffish approach unless it really connects with them. Whereas on the continent, consumers are less cynical, and so they're much more willing to engage with a brand and have brands within their lives and playing a role. And I think as a result of that, brands can use sort of activation experiences and in events and that sort of thing to get their message out, and then that has a sort of a rollover effect or a spillover effect to other consumers, and you get that word of mouth, which I think
brand advocates essentially.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
As consumerism grows in Africa and people start understanding what various brands mean in their lives, do you see that brand loyalty will play a major role in keeping certain customers?
Absolutely, Samantha. They already are. In certain categories, they are hugely brand loyal because they've known the products and they've actually had them for a long time, even though the products haven't been talking to them. They've been available. One way or the other, they've been available. Now they're just a little smarter because they have access to information and they've educated themselves about brands. So, you know, the kind of thing you'll see that all of a sudden they want a Samsung phone because they understand what it can deliver and what it means to them.
But also,
to be a smartphone and get that information.
If you speak to companies, they say that in terms of overall percentage of income, it's a bigger percentage of your income. So you spend a lot more time on making the decision.
Sure.
So when you do make that decision for a certain brand, you stick with it a lot longer. Is that your experience?
Yep, absolutely. And I think for a long time too, by the way, I mean, Africa was a bit of a dumping ground for the rest of the world. So, you know, henceforth this proliferation of brands. But consumers over time have learned for themselves what is the real McCoy. And they will trust those brands because they know what they represent.
The opportunity cost for them, as you said, because money is limited, the opportunity cost of choosing something new is quite high for them because there's something that they trust. They know that it works. If they decide to choose something else and it doesn't work, then it's not that they can just simply, oh, well, that was a mistake, go back to the... to what we bought last week.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, there are some categories where there is, if you like, no exclusive loyalty. And this is where you get categories where people are now multi-products, and banking is one, where you may have a bond here and a credit card there and a loan or a current account elsewhere. Certainly in the cell phone area as well, the mobile area, absolutely, people will carry 2 or 3 different contracts. So those are probably the categories that become a little bit more scary from a loyalty point of view. Very functional, very much driven by the deal of the day in many markets.
How much of a threat, let's shift the focus slightly, are fake products in Africa right now to brands? I mean, how much of a problem is it? Because I brought up a story earlier that, you know, Mac under Estee Lauder had recently launched in Lagos and found when they launched they'd been operating there for 11 years. You know, so how much of a problem is that?
Well, it's huge, and it's huge from 2 levels. One, of course, is from the corporate level, where, you know, there are companies that are purporting to be what they're not in various markets, and that's certainly been one. Fake goods, grey goods have, of course, continentally always been a big issue. The fear element that we spoke about with multinationals entering the market revolves a lot around that, because they don't feel that the court system is going to be good enough to protect IP in those markets. And often you'll enter a market where you are the second player because your brand has already been there. Now, going through courts, through legislation to get your IP protected, to reclaim it, can be an expensive, long-winded and just a painful process. And that scares a few guys away.
These are problems for multinationals, of course, with established brands. How do you, as an advertiser, then convince locals to pay a lot more, pay a premium for the real product?
Like we would in any other market. You've got to keep bringing in, tell them why it's a better product. You've got to keep giving them the differential benefits. You've got to keep convincing them that it's right for them, it'll improve their lives, or do whatever the product's designed to do.
If we go back to the whole experience, the fact that it's not just a communication thing. If somebody picks up a product that is a genuine article and then looks at it versus the fake article, goes into the retail environment and experiences the brand in its proper form there, and then sees it on TV and sees it in a sponsorship or an event, it's that entire package of things that surround the brand that make it genuine. And the more brands let all those items act in unison, if you like, these fake brands will start exiting as being a popular choice.
Yeah. Let's talk about shaping the message as we just wrap this up. Just advice for companies that are looking to invest in Africa, looking to grow their Pan-African presence right now. What are some of the key points that you'd like to highlight from an advertiser's perspective, from a marketing perspective?
I think understanding the environment, obviously, you've got to make sure you've got good intelligence about what it is you're trying to do, where you want to be, and get your fundamentals right before you even start to look at communication. You've got to get your route to market strategies in place, and you've got to be able to get the product out there. And then it's about finding ways in which you can connect your global strategies back to the local consumers. And if you do that, then I think